Everybody ready? You guys all set up? All right. You need to do a sound check? You all good? All right. Everybody ready?
Yeah, let's get everybody. Aprons right here. And we also have Mr. President Ben Crump, two former teachers who firsthand
Yep, you got it. Good?
I'll work around you.
All right. Are you guys ready? All right, here we go. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name is Scott Marter, and I represent Giovanni and Shonda Patterson, the plaintiffs in the case brought against the Baltimore City Public Schools and City of Baltimore. With me today are a number of folks I want to introduce before we begin. I have Ben Crump right here, Armstrong Williams, and then we have several candidates who are running for Baltimore City School Board, two of whom actually are former teachers. Reginald Benbow, April Curley, and Karen Yosefat Bellick. We appreciate them coming out, as well as parents of kids here in Baltimore City. 6 months ago, I stood in front of you and I announced the filing of a landmark lawsuit against Baltimore City Public Schools seeking to reform the school system. Two important things have happened since that date. First, the State Inspector General for Education issued a damning report confirming many of the things that we say in our lawsuit have been going on in the city schools and that they have denied. The second important development, and the reason we're here today, is nationally renowned civil rights lawyer Ben Crump has agreed to join our lawsuit. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to work with Ben to save the children of Baltimore City. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ben.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
I'm Attorney Ben Crump, and I'm honored to join Attorney Scott Marter. I know the parents talked to me a little over a year ago, Armstrong, about this lawsuit, and they kept talking to me about why this was a critical situation, a crisis, they believed. And as I talked to April Curley, a former Baltimore school teacher, about the exigent situation going on, and as I look at these children, I said I could not afford to stand on the sideline and not try to make the system be more accountable to us, especially our children. And I tell you, this is what the fight is for. It's about his future. It is about his future. It is not about the teacher's performance. This lawsuit is about the system and its performance and how it continues to fail our children. It goes to the crux of the matter that educational injustice leads ultimately to racial injustice, because it puts our children, our black and brown children especially, on a fast track to the school to prison pipeline. And April, we talked about it, when you don't have a quality education, when you don't have literacy, it's like you're already in prison. They just haven't closed the cell doors. And that's what our children, not only here in Baltimore, but in cities around America, are facing. And so we have to start putting our children first. We have to start saying, this system, we can do better, and not blaming the children. But let's look at the system and say, how can we come together and make it better? It's not about politics. It's not about Republicans or Democrats. This is about our children and giving all our children an opportunity, just an opportunity in this world. because when they don't have a good education, the opportunities are few and minimal, and the jail cell is staring them right in the face. So I fight against a racist criminal justice system every day of my life when I wake up. And I think the education system has a symbiotic relationship to the criminal justice system. And if we can prevent our children from being lost within the education system, we can prevent them from becoming disproportionately overrepresented in the criminal justice system. The great Negro educator Booker T. Washington said, "It is easier to build up strong children than to try to repair broken men." At this time, you're going to hear from April Curley, and then you'll hear from Mr. Reginald Bimbo, and finally you will hear from a man who has invested his time and his resources into this battle, Armstrong Williams. Ms. Curley.
Thank you, Attorney Crump. A culture of fear and secrecy. This is how the Maryland Office of Inspector General for Education describes the culture within the Baltimore City public school system. A culture that for decades has fostered toxic practices and policies that continue to harm Black and brown children. The recent findings that uncovered that multiple Baltimore City high schools changed thousands of failing grades to passing grades is horrific, and yet it is not shocking. Passing students who failed is not a civil justice, it is a cruel injustice. 13 years ago, when I started my teaching career here in West Baltimore, I taught the most incredible, innovative, creative students that this planet can ever see. I taught alongside brilliant, motivated, driven teachers who care about the kids here. When I was teaching as a first-year teacher, there were a lot of kids who passed my course and there were a handful of kids who failed my course. And I quickly learned that my school leadership pressured teachers to cap how many students would graduate or fail your course. I refused to comply because my moral compass would not be complicit in an abuse of power. So instead, I taught summer school, I dragged my students, I made sure that they earned a passing grade, but more importantly, they got the skills that they needed to be successful in life. City school officials have acknowledged that yes, there's room for improvement, but we are tired of the lip service. We hold them accountable and we demand accountability. This is a city where 90% of our kids are Black and brown. 60% of them identify as low-income students. We need to fight against and be outraged by the explicit educational racism that exists in this city. 16% of high schoolers, 16% are proficient in English right now. Only 9% of our high schoolers are proficient in basic math. We should be in the streets turning tables over and tearing it down because it is taking our kids' lives day in and day out. We must end the soft bigotry of low expectations, because when we hold our expectations high for students, they will rise to the occasion every single time. I've seen them do it. I dare you to search my name, because what you'll find is that I'm unafraid to speak out against injustices that harm Black and brown students. I am currently taking on the largest tech company on the planet, my former employer, Google, to fight against racism that inhibits our kids from having access to opportunities in tech. And let me be very clear, if I can fight against Google, I can surely fight against the elected officials that have let this city go downhill and stripped our kids of their power and autonomy to create a life for themselves by not giving them an adequate education. Our students are talented, but they are limited. They are limited by access to opportunities, and it is up to us to do better. So let's lift accountability and let's root out the toxicity that our elected officials are bringing. I am April. I am running for school board because our kids and our families and our city deserves better. And I will be the one to go in and scare all of the elected officials who owe us answers. Thank you.
Thank you, April, and let me start by saying every child deserves an excellent education. As Mr. Crump said, that message should unite us. This is not about politics. But let's be real, we have to stop the insanity. We can't keep choosing the same folks year after year and expect different results. We're not headed in the right direction. Just last year alone, the high school graduation rate is down to 69%. That's a failure. But it's not the fault of our students. The system has failed our students. There is so much talent in Baltimore. Look around you. You see it with the squeegee boys. What's to stop a squeegee boy or girl from becoming an investment banker? It's their zip code. They have tenacity. They risk their lives every day, but yet they're limited by opportunity. We have to expand opportunity, and we have to do right in the place that students spend most of their day. 6.5 to 7 hours spent in the schoolroom, like where I taught at Ace Middle School, High School, where yes, we were encouraged to try to make it so that as many students could pass as possible. And that's just not right. So on July 19th and on November 8th, the voters of this city and this state have a choice. And I'm Reginald Benbow, and I hope that you'll join me in fighting for justice and stop the insanity. Thank you.
So as a broadcast owner and someone who really believes in philanthropy, we've spent so much time in Baltimore over the last 2 years with crisis in the classroom, talking to parents, talking to students, and hearing their cry. And I realized there's just some things that transcends politics and the media headlines. And it's really about morality. And Ben and I have been friends for over a decade. And I would often send him stories from Project Baltimore, send him stories from all across the country, Rochester, New York, California. Why is it, this is a question I ask today, why is it all across America, not just in Baltimore, that kids who happen to be brown and black face these illiteracy challenges, face these educational challenges? Why is it the same all across the country? Why? And so I encourage my friend Ben Crump to do something. I wanted to do more. And one of the things that I've learned in talking to Ben is that when we got the best results in terms of progress in this country, it has been through the court system. The court system. The court system, whether it's Brown versus Board of Education, has advanced the causes for people of color and minorities for the last several decades. And so his being a premier lawyer, civil rights, he agonized about being here today. Let me be clear. He agonized because he understood the fallout, what people would say about him, what they would possibly call him. But one morning he called me about 5 a.m. and he said he had a conscious moment, a moral moment. And he said, you know what? People have always believed that what I do is file lawsuits when it involves law enforcement and race. He said, everything starts in the classroom. If these kids are not educated, it leads to sexual trafficking, human trafficking, prostitution, crime, homicide. He said, how can I not look at the classroom? How can I not be a voice for the parents and for these children? He said, forget about Republican and Democrat. He said, this is something I must do. His law firm, his friends have said, how can you do this? He said, because I do it for the parents and the children who've been left behind, who have no voice. This is why I must show today for those parents to let them know that while you may think you know who I am, it's always about all children, not just certain children. And for those who are low income, that don't have the voice and feel left out, your children is the next victim of crime, lack of education, lack of ghosting in the classroom. He is your voice. It's why he's in Baltimore today. And yes, there will be fallout, but we know the righteous, and when we do things for moral reasons and the right reasons, we may get arrows in the short run, but in the end, if the children win, and if one child is educated, if one child stays out of jail, one parent saved the lives of their children, then we would have accomplished something standing on the steps of this courtroom in Baltimore today. So I want to give, as Aretha Franklin would say, give that proper respect. I want to give the respect to this man for transcending politics, transcending what people think about him, and standing here for those voiceless parents and children that need to do something about this educational crisis all across America.
Just this past weekend, another child in Baltimore City was murdered. 14 years old this time. How many more children have to be murdered in this city because the education system is failing our children? How many more children need to be imprisoned because they have no hope? They graduate or they finish school and they can't read, they can't write. They have no hope. This lawsuit seeks to reform that and change that. So what I want to do now is to talk a little bit about the lawsuit, give you little details, and answer your questions about the lawsuit itself. Giovanni and Shonda Patterson have agreed to bring this lawsuit. They decided to bring this lawsuit as taxpayers because they are affected in the city. When you think about what happens, you have kids who we put billions and billions of dollars into the school system. They graduate or they drop out, they can't read, they can't write. And where do they wind up? They wind up right here. And we're spending money on them in here with the courts, the judges, the prosecutors, the defense lawyers. And then where do they wind up? Over there at the jail on the other side of town. We're going to try to stop that. We're taking a unique approach here. And this lawsuit approaches it differently than any other lawsuit we've ever seen done. We're filing this as a complaint by taxpayers saying that their dollars are being wasted by the people over at North Avenue when they're not educating our children. Most of the cases that have been brought in the past have been brought with a theory of civil rights or a constitutional right to have a good education. But the courts have said no, they've shut the door. So we're trying a different approach, one that's never been brought around the country. And we believe this is going to be successful. And when it is, with the help of Ben and Armstrong and others, it is going to change this city. Imagine for a second if instead of these kids not being able to read and write and being in the criminal justice system, imagine if every kid in this city went to college. Every one of them. What would change?
Amen.
Everything would change. Everything would change. Instead of spending money on more jails, we could spend money on medical research. Instead of spending money on prisons, we could spend money to help with roads, infrastructure, all of these other things. And that's what we seek to accomplish here. So with that, I invite any questions you have, and I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question for Mr. Crump.
Sure.
So you mentioned the failing school system. For years, for decades, Baltimore City Schools has been one of the most funded, but one of the most underperforming city school systems in America. For you, why is this the moment now to address this issue?
Yeah, as Armstrong said, you know, the Pattersons reached out a year ago for me to join Scott in this very novel lawsuit. And I understood a lot of the dynamics, and so I said, well, let me learn more about it. And they continued to give me the articles about the schools in crisis, education in crisis. And I had been part of a legal team who appealed the decision in Detroit about whether children had the right to literacy. And we were successful in getting the court to acknowledge that our children have a right to literacy in America. It is very troubling, and you know, you don't have to be a PhD or academician to understand that if you come out in this world with no education and no literacy, you can't read or write, you're already in prison. I mean, you literally are already in prison. They just haven't slammed the cell door. And so the reason I joined this legal team headed by Scott Marter and this novel legal approach, because if we can somehow get everybody to the table here in Baltimore and be transparent and talk about how we can make it better for all of our children, then maybe we can do it in other cities across America, and we can change the dismal educational outcomes that we're seeing currently in America. And we need allies. We need the National Education Association. We need everybody at the table. This is not about teacher performance. As April and Reggie said, the teachers are passionate about trying to teach our children. We need a system that will be part of the solution and not part of the problem. We need everybody coming to the table to say, yeah, we can't keep doing things the way we're doing them. Let's be honest. If we keep doing things the same way and expect different results, what lesson are we teaching our children? That's insanity.
Is this bigger than Baltimore, and could this be the start of similar action in other cities?
I do think this is bigger than just Baltimore. I think in Rochester, New York, and places like New Orleans, places all across America have these failing grades, these failing statistics of the graduation rate, especially of black and brown children. And I think the educational injustice does lead to racial injustice because it gets that overpopulation of the school to prison pipeline of little black boys and little brown boys and black and brown girls. And so we look at Baltimore as the litmus test of, can we all come to the table and do better? We Armstrong and Scott alluded to the courts in America traditionally have advanced progress, social progress. And we thought after Brown versus Board of Education, we had got to the point where we wouldn't be back here these many years later saying we turn to the courts again to try to advance progress. But that's what we're doing, and we're doing it just like Thurgood Marshall and them fought for quality education for all children. That's all we're trying to do. We're not, you don't want to be divisive. You want to say, how can we all come together? Let's quit drawing lines in the sand and let's say, let's step over those lines for our children and let's work together. Whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat, our children are the solution that's going to impact this world more than any political party.
This is affecting individuals, but it's also affecting communities, like the future of individuals, but also communities as a whole. This is impacting.
It is. It affects community as a whole, but more importantly, it impacts each of our children. I've seen it where people have lost their children unjustly, and our children are our future. And one of the most difficult things to do is to have a parent lose a child because ultimately you've lost your future. I think you can kill people in many ways. You can kill them with, a racist criminal justice system. You can kill them by them not having adequate education to be ready to be part of a constructive society quicker than you can kill them with a bullet. These slow deaths are what we're focused on today. These slow deaths where our children are being killed softly by uncaring, unsympathetic school system that says it's okay for you to be left behind. No, what we really want is a system that says, let's fight for all our children.
What is the lawsuit called? What rewards are you guys seeking in case you guys do get?
So that's a great question. This is not the typical lawsuit seeking money damages. We're looking to have the court impose oversight on the school system to make the school system do what it's legally supposed to do. You don't graduate kids who can't read and write. You don't pass people from one grade to another when they haven't met the requirements to do that. And that's what the lawsuit seeks to accomplish. When you have the state inspector general issuing a report saying that 12,000 grades were improperly changed. That report just came out weeks ago. That's wrong. And the school system for years denied that that was taking place. So now it's time for the courts to have oversight and to make them do what they're legally supposed to do.
Was the district made aware that you guys would be filing this lawsuit, and if so, when?
We did not make the district aware that we were filing this lawsuit, but I should tell you, they should have been expecting this for decades. And let me kind of roll things back for a little bit. The school system denied that improper grade changing was taking place back in the period before 2018. There was a big lawsuit that got a bunch of documents released that showed that improper grade changing was actually taking place. We found quite a few instances of it, but now the state inspector general in an audit found there were over 12,000 instances of it. So what else is going on there at the schools? They should have known this was coming a long time ago.
Yeah. And we can do better. That's the short answer. We can do better, and everybody knows we can do better. We just got to have a willingness to try to do better. And so far, that's been the impediment. Everybody agreeing to come to the table and let's talk about how we get to solutions.
You know, one of the things that I've always thought is unfair is that we have some great teachers here in the city who go into school every day and they work hard. After class, they're preparing their lessons. They're spending their own money to buy school supplies. And yet they teach the kids, they do the best they can, and then at the end of the school period, they're told, well, you need to change the grade that child earned. And that's not fair to that teacher. That teacher did everything the teacher was supposed to do and should not have pressure put on them from North Avenue or their principal to do something that's wrong.
So we will keep you informed. Thank you for paying attention to this important, critical matter for the future of all our children. Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. You know, if you send me an email to the email on the press release, I'm happy to send it to you. And anybody else?
Yeah. Are you guys?